TEDx is all about spreading ideas. But what if you had an idea and you wanted to communicate it with the person sitting next to you, but you knew when you opened your mouth, the words wouldn't come out? It might sound like I'm quoting the lyrical genius rapper Eminem, but no, this is how you might feel when you're nervous, shy, scared, embarrassed, or just flat out uncomfortable. For people that have a speech impediment, this is how they feel all the time before they're about to speak. I was born in Tabriz, Iran, which is on the northern side of Iran, close to the borders of Azerbaijan. Now, in Tabriz, the language Azeri is also spoken, but it's also the native language of Azerbaijan. I grew up in a household where Azeri was spoken at home, and I was exposed to Turkish in various forms of media, and Farsi everywhere else, because it's the most commonly spoken language in Iran. Now, with being exposed to these three languages, my family created its own hybrid language, which consisted of these three languages. So we would say words that would mean the same thing, but would be easier to say. So if a word meant the same thing, but only had 2 syllables compared to a word that had 3 syllables, I would just say the word that had 2 syllables. Pretty simple. But I did that more than my parents. And the reason I did this wasn't because it was easier. I just couldn't say it. So I would substitute easier words and say this. Now, I had a speaking problem at the time, but it wasn't apparent. People just assumed I was going through my baby talk phase, but it wasn't. When I moved to America in '96, this all changed. I got introduced to English. This language is not like none of those three. There's no overlap. The sounds are different. It's a complete new world. So, only person that speaks English in my household is the TV. So my dad came here before, so he was my role model. I looked up to him because he could speak it the best. Now, when it came to me staying at home, I just watched TV, got a little bit of English here and there, but I didn't really speak it. I was embarrassed to speak it because I couldn't speak it. But this became obvious through my lack of speaking. So I used to speak with my body language. If I wanted to talk, I used to act it out like charades. I used to read your body language in return. Now my charades phase, as my parents called it, became evident when I was in preschool. Because preschool, there is a moment which my parents will never let me live down. Because the teacher even called my parents and told them to come in class. Well, the teacher has reading time. And during reading time, the teacher sits in her rocking chair, rocks back and forth, reads her book, and makes all of us sit crisscross applesauce on the carpet and listen to her. There's 2 problems here. I can't read your body language when you're just rocking back and forth, and I don't understand English. So as a toddler, I can only listen for so long before I get bored. And when I get bored, I was combing this girl's hair in front of me like a Persian cat. Now, there's 2 things I'm confused about, besides what the teacher was speaking. If the girl liked me back, because it was apparent from my body language, I liked her. But that's a whole different talk in a whole different language. Now, as time goes on, I go into elementary school. In elementary school, it became more evident that I had trouble speaking. So I went to see a therapist, a speech therapist. We worked together to pinpoint areas where I struggled. And at one point, I thought it was like the entire alphabet I struggled with, but I figured it out. It was CH, C, S, TH, T's. Okay, I won't stop there. But there were a few of them. So we worked on sounds, but then we worked on phrases. Phrases were especially difficult because I had to say words that she told me to say, and I knew I couldn't say them, and she knew that too, which was bad. So we worked with these phrases, but these phrases were like tongue twisters. You guys know the tongue twister in English? Sally sells, come on, say it with me. Sally sells seashells on the seashore. Yeah, I never really learned that, but that's not the point. She made me say this, but I never could say it. So I would go home, which she told me to practice this, I wouldn't. I would go home and go to my best friend, the thesaurus, because it had the answer to what I lacked. The words I could say, but meant the same thing. So that exact same thing you said, that's how I feel when I was speaking English. But I substituted that. So it became Sally hustles seashells on the beach. Well, you get the gist, but it doesn't really sound the same. And that's still how the way I speak now. I use that word a lot. So if you're around me, you're gonna hear hustle, hustle, hustle a bunch. You're gonna wonder, why doesn't this kid ever say the word sell? That's the reason why. So I got teased while I was going to school because I used to talk like this growing up. So this put me in a state of isolation. But inside this isolation is where I found my passion. This passion was running, because when I ran in elementary school, I didn't have to talk and no one talked to me. It was my safe area. But when I ran, there was something I was running away from, the problem at hand. But I enjoyed running. So my 5th grade, my school put on a prize. Whoever ran the most miles gets a prize. And I thought subconsciously, if I ran the most miles, I will get a prize and I will earn the respect of these kids that teased me. Well, I ran the most miles, I got the prize, I got some respect, but that didn't change my speaking. I was running away from the problem. It wasn't until high school, someone said, Aslan, if you want to be successful, you have to get out your comfort zone. And I did that exact thing. But what happened is that my flaws were being exploited. So when I speak, I failed and people laughed. But the laughter for once didn't stop me, kept me going. The laughter motivated me because I knew when I laughed with them, I was connecting with them. That connection was something I avoided all my life. So I failed. I connected. And this is where the hello world moment hit me. This is the part where my weakness becomes a strength. Now I wanted to take my philosophy, getting out my comfort zone to a new level. So a person that can't speak English very well takes a job selling. So our first job, I started selling pool supplies. I went from being a shy employee, within 3 months, I had some of the highest units sold. So I wanted to do this again. So what I did, I started selling cars. Now I don't look like a typical car salesman, but man, I had a huge learning curve to go through. I wasn't the loudest one at the car dealership, but I did talk the most. If you go back to the dealership and ask, who talked the most? Without skipping a beat, everyone there would say my name. And from this process of just continuing this philosophy, of just getting out my comfort zone, even standing up here, getting out my comfort zone, I've realized that something that I viewed as a weakness, something I avoided, something I even ran away from, I hit it straightforward. And I solved that problem by turning that weakness into a strength. Then I turned it into an asset by capitalizing on it, by seeing what I could do with it, putting me in a position where I had to do that and face it. Now, through this process, I've turned that weakness into a passion. I love talking. Anytime you see me, I'm probably talking. Now, I'm gonna leave you with this. Speak loudly, speak proudly, and get out your comfort zone. Thank you.